Welcome to Tennis Spin, where we put our spin on your tennis. Today, I'm going to be talking about Babolat RPM strings. What are the differences? Why are there so many? Stay tuned. All right, guys, before I get started, I just joined a community called Buy Me a Coffee because I've been packing on a lot of pounds from you guys buying me beers. Thank you, though. So check out my community, Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you in advance. It's buymeacoffee.com/tennis spin. The link is below. Thank you for my coffee habit. So today's subject is going to be Babolat RPM strings. I'll bet a bunch of you know that there are actually 5 different types of RPM, but I'll bet that a lot of you don't know that when you walk in and say, I'd like RPM, that you're getting just the regular RPM. I would say 90% of the population who asks for RPM gets the original RPM, and that's, that's a good string. That's probably the best-selling string. I wouldn't say highest performance string, but definitely a top 3 polyester string on the market. Now, let me cut through the clutter a little bit for you today, as Babolat has changed their packaging and they've kind of made them look alike. So as you can see, like they're all gonna look like this, right? If you're not paying attention, you're gonna grab the wrong one, right? I have some old packaging here, which actually differentiates, what they were, but because they've changed the packaging, right? Look at these 3 right here. Let's pan over these. So this is supposedly your original RPM. This is supposedly this one, RPM rough, right? They call it rough up here, spin max, right? This is the new one, RPM power, spin power. But if you look, right, you got spin, 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 RPM, RPM, RPM. So unless you're looking down here, right, you don't know what you're getting, right? So it just adds more confusion to the whole RPM family. But enough about me complaining. They've already heard it from me. Now you're hearing it from me. So sorry about that. Let me start by cutting through the clutter now. All right, so RPM. Let me start with the least known and the least selling RPM, and that's the RPM team. I don't sell many of these. When I do, it's probably to girls because of this cute pink color, or a younger junior. This would be similar to like a Hyper G type of a string. It's soft. It's RPM, but softer. So it would be considered like RPM soft if they made one. It doesn't get much love because the regular RPM does so well, and Hyper G and Cyclone and other strings are on the market. So this is kind of like the illegitimate child of the line. They have it just for those people who want something softer, but don't sell many of it. But this is what I would consider RPM soft, okay? And they call it team. All right, so the next one to the line was actually in a different family. They now call this RPM Pro Hurricane Tour, or RPM Pro Hurricane Tour. It used to be just called Pro Hurricane Tour. They've eliminated Pro Hurricane line. The original Pro Hurricane is no longer around. but enough people use this string that they've kept it around and just added RPM to the name. If you look at the specs of this string and the specs of the regular RPM Blast, the specs are identical. They came out with this first, and then they came out with the RPM. In my mind, they basically took this string and painted it black or dyed it black. But in the dyeing process, it alters the play of the strings. Because I would say 99 out of 100 people who use this string and then use RPM, they're nothing alike. They're different. So in my mind, they basically painted this, dyed it black, and that's what makes the difference in the feel of the string. Because as you know in some of my other videos, we've all learned that when you alter the color of the string, you alter what the string does. So you alter the whole dynamics of what the string does and can do. It gets softer or firmer depending on what color it is, because it does affect the whole structure of the string. So Pro Hurricane Tour in now RPM family, still around. Different packaging though. It's going to look like that. Okay. Now, the next one is my least favorite of the line. It's that new RPM Power. It's that brown string or whatever you want to call it. I call it brown, but it could be platinum. Copper, platinum, doesn't matter. It's not a good string. So I figured out a way to use this string that would benefit everybody. This is a great main. If you want a soft poly in the RPM family, use it on the main. It is a nice soft main. Cross it with a TNT or a Velocity or whatever you guys choose. But that's how this plays well. If you go full bed with this, it plays well, but it starts to notch way too fast. It literally starts to notch while I'm stringing it. Okay, so that for full bed, I don't love it. I know a bunch of people out there that do, but that's just my personal opinion. I'm not in love with this, and I'm sure the sales are showing it too. Let me know if you've tried this and if you like it. But my way of using this is using it in a hybrid and putting it on a main. So this is the second softest in the line, team being the softest, okay? So if you want power, spin, easy on the arm on an RPM string, this would be your string, but use it on a hybrid. Rough. So they've roughened up RPM for you. You know, they got mad at the string and beat it up a little bit. So not only does it have edges, right? It got roughened up. So it's kind of like an ALU rough, and RPM got married and came up with this string. So we got 8 sides from the RPM, and then we got the rough from the ALU. So now you got massive spin on an RPM rough. So this is actually a pretty soft string for what it is, and it slides really, really well. It does what it's advertising. It's going to give you more spin than regular ALU. So if you want even more spin than the standard RPM, give this one a shot. Spin is the name of the game for this one. Rough, RPM, rough. Now, the standard RPM. This is the #1 string that they sell in this line. 8-sided, just like the rest of these, okay? So they designed this string 12 years ago, I want to say, for Rafa. Well, basically for Rafa to promote, because back then he was using some cheap old string that was like a 140, super thick. but they wanted to put a name to a string to Rafa, and this was the one. RPM, right? Rotations per minute, because of how Rafa hits the ball with such massive spin. There you go, that one. The original packaging shows you 8 sides, right? Edges. The edges aren't that defined though in this particular string, unlike a Black Widow or a Gamma Ocho. So they're a little more subtle so that it slides a little better, but this is the firmest of all of these strings. So if you want traditional poly feel, this is the one you use. And I'm sure a ton of you guys use it because it's definitely a top 3 string here too. But this is the original. This comes in 3 gauges. Actually, it comes in 4 gauges. We got an 18 gauge, a 17 gauge, a 16 gauge, and for all you string breakers, we got a 15 light. So that's the thickest they make. I heard that Rafa uses a 15 true, which is a 140, that they don't market to you and me. But number 1 in the line, okay? The rest of these only come in a 17 gauge and a 16 gauge. So the number 1 selling string is the regular old RPM, now called Spin Control. Also the firmest, okay? Number 1. The second firmest is really not even an RPM, but when you change it black, then it's called RPM, but it's Pro Hurricane Tour, okay? It's in the RPM line now. So just a quick overview of the RPM string. Number 1 selling string and the original, now called Spin Control. All right, that's the firmest of them all. Second firmest is going to be called RPM Pro Hurricane Tour. I don't sell too many of those anymore. The third firmest and the one that produces the most spin is called Spin Max. Okay, so it's the roughened up RPM. The softest, second softest, is that new platinum, copper, brown, colored string that you should probably only use for the main. Don't use it for the whole bed, okay? It's soft and it's playable, but doesn't work full bed. Final one is the team. Okay, so if you're a Hybrid G user, Hybrid G soft user, this is your string, okay? Especially if you want that pink. All right, so that's the Babolat RPM tennis string line. Thank you for watching Tennis Spin, where we put our spin on your tennis.